Jazz backing tracks or play-alongs can be great tools to improve your jazz improvisation, but it could be possible that the way you're actually using them isn't helping you very much. Let's talk about strategies for using jazz play-alongs. So it's important for you to understand that jazz backing tracks are not natural environments for jazz improvisation. That's because jazz is more of a social kind of music. You're meant to be improvising and reacting to what other actual musicians are doing. Backing tracks are just pre-recorded sterile musical environments that aren't reacting to anything that you're doing. So they're not really a replacement for playing with other musicians at all. But that doesn't mean that playing along with backing tracks isn't beneficial. In fact, it can be very beneficial when thought of as musical playgrounds to experiment and try out different musical ideas. Essentially getting better at the fundamentals of how to improvise. But the most common mistake that I see musicians making with backing tracks is they just put it on and they keep practicing for the entire track and keep repeating it over and over again, hoping to get better results each time. But the reality is they don't actually feel like they're getting better because they're not actually stopping to figure out what parts of the song they need to work on and fix. So here on the screen, I have a program called Song Master up, and the chord changes that are in here are the tune Autumn Leaves. Really classic jazz standard that has lots of great 2-5-1 chord progressions in it and a good one to practice. So what I did is I took one of our jazz backing tracks that Learn Jazz Standards has made. I'll be sure to put a link in the description down below and put it into this program called Song Master. Also, I'll leave a link to that in the description down below. Now, once uploaded into Song Master, it actually kind of puts the chords there for us. So we have C minor 7, F7, B flat major 7, E flat major 7, A minor 7 flat 5, D7, and G minor 7, which are in fact the first 8 bars of Autumn Leaves. So let me play the melody along with the backing track before we do anything with it at all. So tip number 1 for practicing with backing tracks is to loop sections. So taking a look here at Autumn Leaves, the first 3 bars are a 2-5-1 and B flat major, okay? A 2-5-1 is the most common chord progression in jazz. So let's just say, for example, that I'm struggling with playing good ideas over a 2-5-1. Well, instead of just playing through the entire song form of Autumn Leaves, why don't we just loop this section? So what I'm gonna do is press this loop button right here where I can actually select which section I want to loop. So I'm actually gonna select this section right here, which includes the 4 chord. And let's just practice for a second this 2-5-1-4 and see what we can come up with. Okay, so now I can actually get around to practicing what this sounds like, right? Instead of moving on to the next section, like we can really start working on this 2-5-1 chord progression. Now, another section I might want to loop is actually right here. It's the A minor 7 flat 5 to the G minor 7, which actually is a minor 2-5-1 chord progression, which is the second most important chord progression in all of jazz. And I want to figure out some ideas that I can play over it, especially this half diminished chord to start with, because it's kind of tricky. So let's give it a shot and see what it sounds like. exploring this a little bit, I actually feel like it's a little bit too quick of a tempo for me, which leads me to tip number 2. And tip number 2 is to slow down the tempo. So currently, as you can see with this metronome right here, it's actually at 140 BPM. And I kind of want to make it a little bit slower than that. So over here at the speed on Songmaster, I'm gonna go ahead and slow it down to 80% of the tempo, which is 112 BPM. So this is quite a bit slower, but when you want to get better at playing something, then slowing something down is a great idea. So of course we can do this for the entire backing track, but in this case, let's keep this loop on the minor 251 and see what we come up with. And the great thing, of course, like Songmaster and other slow downer softwares out there, is that when we're slowing down the speed here, it's not actually changing the pitch, so we're gonna be playing in the accurate key. We can go the other way around too. Let's say I actually want to practice playing a lot faster. Let's go ahead and speed that up dramatically to 1.4%. So now we're at 196 BPM. Now already I hope you can see that this is a lot better practice than just simply listening to the entire backing track and practicing with the whole thing. Looping sections and then slowing or speeding them down is allowing us to practice in a much deeper, better way. Now, as we go through this process of looping and slowing things down, we might start feeling comfortable with these chord progressions and decide, actually, let's expand this even further so that we're doing the first 8 bars in totality and put that on a loop for a little bit before actually getting to an entire chorus. So let's move on to tip number 3, and tip number 3 is to transpose. So let's go ahead and zoom back in here to our 2-5-1 chord progression at the very beginning and loop this section. So this is a 2-5-1 in the key of B flat, but let's just say that we want to practice this in another key, because we know that playing a 2-5-1 in every single key is ultimately going to be an important skill for us to have. So the first option we have here on Songmaster is we can do a pitch transposition. We can move it up in semitones. So for example, 1 semitone would be B major and 2 semitones would be C major. So now we can actually practice this chord progression in C major. We can get really good at playing this in C major as well. But of course, like I mentioned, actually being able to play an important chord progression like this in all 12 keys is a super great idea. So one thing that we can do here in Songmaster is go over to this key trainer over here. I'm going to press the on button and then click Setup, which is basically going to allow us to select the sequence of how we're going to practice these keys. So we can select the circle of fifths, the circle of fourths, chromatic ascent, chromatic descent, whole step ascent, and whole step descent. Personally, I love practicing in the circle of fourths. So now that we've applied that to this chord progression, let's start seeing how we can practice this in all 12 keys. on and so forth through the circle of keys. And of course we can slow it down, we can speed it up, and we can also change it to the circle of fifths or chromatic ascending, just other ways to practice working this through the different keys. So this to me is a much better way to practice with jazz backing tracks or jazz play-alongs. I'll leave a link to Songmaster in the description down below, as well as a library of 226 MP3 backing tracks of the most important jazz standards that we provide down in the description down below as well. Now, if you're like, Brent, we need to take a step back for a second because I have no idea how to improvise over 2-5-1s or anything else in the first place, then check out this video on the screen right now called Jazz Improv Explained. I really start from the very beginning, the most simplest terms, how to start improvising over jazz standards. So click on that video right now. Make sure you like this video if you found it helpful. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you've never done that before, and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers.